Hi guys, here we go again. The following game was played at a regional championship of my district with 21 participants. In order to stay on top, I had to win in this encounter against a Ukrainian player. Lucky me, eventually everything went well both in that particular game, as well as later on in the tournament. I won by a tiny margin. A memorable and distinctive piece of work. I had white pieces, the venerable Reti move, D5, G3. I prefer this particular move order, cutting out some defenses while maintaining flexibility. Knight f6, c4, c6, bishop g2, bishop f5. In the previous video I have dealt with d takes c4 and pointed at some ideas for white. C takes d5. Queen b3, queen b6 would be reasonable too. Taking back with the piece is possible, but then we have the long-term advantage with our center pawns. So black took back with the pawn, clearing c6 for the knight. Queen b3, trying to make use of the weakness of b7 because the bishop has left c8 early. And there's a bunch of queen moves at hand in order to protect b7, but the queen could end up exposed later on the c file or in the center. We're gonna have a quick look at some ideas against. Let's say queen c7 or queen c8, queen c7, knight c3, e6, developing. With tempo, and now let's say e5. It's a bit better for white, or queen d7, typical, sacrificing a pawn. With splendid compensation. Winning back the pawn at some point in time and with good prospects of an advantage. Probably best is knight c6. This is probably best, but certainly not everyone's taste. I usually get castled. I wouldn't dare to take the pawn, although some good players don't mind. Sample line. As usual, you can try, but you have been warned. As mentioned before, I play usually castling. And now probably best is e5, and nothing dramatic has happened. Many players go queen d7 or queen c8 or queen c7. Sample game of mine, blitz game in the internet against leeches 2500. Similar ideas as shown before. Good compensation. And winning back, regaining back the pawn, maintaining a slight edge. In fact, I managed to win this game rather quickly and resigns. Played this here on the leeches server. Okay, however, my opponent went the typical queen b6, and I took. There are alternatives like this particular variation. time and again you will see this lever cracking up black center and freeing the bishop g2. Slightly better for white. There are still some games in the database with exactly this position. Queen b6, a6. Should yield white a small edge owing to the doubled pawns. However, one should not underestimate black's chances. He has two valuable open files and no obviously bad pieces at his disposal. Knight c3, development, d3, h6. Not necessary, however, it's not bad in order to preserve the bishop. Moreover, sometimes enabling g7, g5. Different moves are possible, like rook a5 or king d7. There's a grandmaster game in the database which went something like this. This should be around equal. Rook c8, that was the choice of my opponent. It's probably better to keep the rook on the a file to establish control over some squares. King d7. And I went rook ac1. There's a predecessor game which white has won convincingly. However, I used rook ac1, had still some rook fd1 and e4 ideas in mind. A3. I was a bit afraid of g5, and now knight e5 would be a huge blunder because on account of king e7, this is simply losing a piece, and white has no chance but to throw in the towel. But bishop e5 is possible, like this. So I was pondering about h4 actually, but finally a3. Missing my main threat. Yeah, black hasn't a particular good way to counter that. Dropping back the bishop. I was even contemplating about crazy stuff like bishop c7. That's rather a high risk, low reward story. Possible white's slightly better, but too risky, I guess. So just dropping back the attack bishop. Bishop g4. Protecting e2 and improving the king. Black took voluntarily. So far everything went smoothly. Computer likes knight c3, I think. I was trying to exchange. This doesn't work. So check and king d7. Bishop b2. Rook takes c8. Swapping further pieces. Improving the bishop. I was even thinking about bishop e4, but decided to take with d pawn. a4 in order to take b7, b5 out of the position. b8, king2. Move 40, time control successfully reached, and yeah, this should be an easy win, a healthy pass pawn up, a pair of bishops, but things turned out not to be a no-brainer. I didn't rush with 41 e5 before reaching the time control, but I played it after some calculation thereafter. It turned out to be a mistake, at least in practical terms. The engine, however, experienced no problems at all. The problem is how to enter the fray. The king cannot penetrate on either wing by easy means. The b pawn has some drawbacks intrinsically. One cannot use the a file. There's simply not enough space to bypass. So as I mentioned before, the computer has no problems winning this position. Like just a sample line, king d4. Let's say b6 or back or king c7, and this is winning. The computer exactly knows when he can afford to sack a pawn. g4 was my choice. Bit trying out some moves without risking anything, but this leads to nothing so far. Now the bishop is trapped, but as well as my pieces in order to catch him. h3, h5. Now I should have taken is a mistake owing to this is equal, so there is no chance to win this position against an engine. So king c4 was wrong. Bishop e2, he didn't take. I understood. Yeah, in contrast to me, the engine wins easily, no issues whatsoever. The engine suggests king g3, and now let's say f5. This is winning easily. Or sorry, check. That's what I missed. This is winning. Bishop f2. And another good line suggested by the engine is and now winning, or very fancy, that fancy maneuver I missed. Alternatives. Yeah, this is easy winning. Okay. I was down to 1 or 2 minutes on the clock, and I had to do something pragmatically. So my choice was bishop h6 actually, with the idea and this was my idea. However, the position is equal after actually the engine says it's a draw now. And black has some relatively easy ideas to keep the draw. Now this leads to nowhere, and you know what to do. Equal, or so taking on h4 works. Even so, bishop c3, threatening king f6, and this is also restoring equality. Draw. And eventually I was lucky. The final and decisive mistake after a long consideration. Pawn endgames are very deceptive. In fact, here are 2 entirely different ways to win. You can pause the video and figure them out yourselves. I went king g5, which is winning. The alternative is, so let's start with what is not winning. Not winning is this, a draw. Also winning is king e4 on account of this variation, or sorry, king d7, clearly winning. So king e4 is winning basically. As I mentioned before, king g5, threatening king g6 and king g7 and touchdown. Like, let's say h4. It's the more stubborn defense. That's what my opponent played. And now the only move h4 on king g8. Probably more resilient. King f7. Wins, or e5. Only move. and checkmate. So h4 was the only move which is winning. My opponent played e5, king f5, simply munching the pawn. And yeah, this is one. One cannot go draw, so let's say this would have been the more down-to-earth approach, admittedly. Eating the second pawn. I try to display good style, and I use the triangle, so triangulating in order to pass the move to black is enough to win. Triangle complete, and resigns on account of this particular line. So as Hein Donner pointed out wittily, chess is and will always be a game of chance. Thanks for watching.